Emerging Threats Hub. Crossroads, when war with Iran meets Europe's defense crisis.
What happens when your enemy's enemy becomes your enemy's ally? That's not a riddle. It's the question keeping Pentagon planners awake tonight. Welcome to Emerging Threats Hub. I'm Sebastian. This week, the world has shifted beneath our feet. Operation Epic Fury. Operation Roaring Lion. These are not the names of Hollywood films. They are the designations for joint U.S.-Israeli strikes that have killed Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. The stated goal? Regime change. The reality? We are witnessing the collapse of a regional order that has governed the Middle East for nearly 50 years. But here's what the headlines won't tell you. This conflict is exposing fractures far beyond the Persian Gulf. From Brussels to Berlin, European leaders are confronting an uncomfortable truth. Their defense architecture was built for a different era, and the consequences of that failure are now impossible to ignore. Today, we're going beyond the immediate headlines to understand the systems at play. We'll examine the war itself, its causes, its likely trajectories, and its humanitarian dimensions. We'll analyze the technology reshaping this battlefield, from cyber operations to drone warfare. We'll explore how Europe's defense crisis intersects with this moment. And we'll ask the question that matters most. What are the pathways toward de-escalation and a just peace? This is not about fear-mongering. This is about understanding the architecture of stability and how we might rebuild it.
Active conflicts. The Iran war escalation.
Let's begin with the conflict itself. On February 26, 2026, United States and Israeli forces launched coordinated strikes against Iranian leadership and nuclear infrastructure. The operations, Epic Fury and Roaring Lion, resulted in the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. The stated objective is regime change. Iran has responded with missile attacks on Israel, Gulf states hosting American forces, and Cyprus. This represents a fundamental shift. For decades, the US-Iran confrontation played out through proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shia militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen. We are now in direct state-on-state warfare. Now, a conventional realist analysis would tell you this was inevitable, that Iran's nuclear ambitions and regional aggression made conflict unavoidable. But I want to push back on that framing. International politics is not a mechanical process. It is socially constructed. The decisions that led us here were choices, not laws of nature. Consider the diplomatic overture that was rejected. According to reports from Defense Priorities, Iran reached out to the CIA through back channels. The response from the Trump administration, too late. This matters because it reveals that alternatives existed. The choice to foreclose diplomacy was exactly that, a choice. The Pentagon has assured Congress this is not another Iraq war, but the signals from the White House suggest otherwise. President Trump has stated, and I quote, "I won't get bored," implying a commitment to prolonged engagement. Meanwhile, the constitutional questions are profound. As Foreign Affairs has documented, we are seeing a fundamental challenge to congressional war powers. One person's war, as they frame it, raises the question, who decides when a nation goes to war? Let's examine the regional reverberations. The spillover has begun. The Small Wars Journal reports that Kurdish fighters are massing near Iran's borders, a potential new front opening. The Atlantic Council has noted that what happens in Iran doesn't stay in Iran. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, which host American forces, have already been targeted. Perhaps most striking is the strange bedfellows emerging. Small Wars Journal reports that Al-Qaeda may actually fight for Iran. Let that sink in. Al-Qaeda, the organization that declared war on the United States on September 11th, potentially aligning with a Shia theocracy it once considered heretical. This is not alliance in any conventional sense. It is tactical convenience born of shared enmity. And it suggests a world where old categories no longer apply. China's calculus is also shifting. According to Foreign Affairs, Beijing cares about oil, not the regime. But oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz, and prolonged conflict threatens those flows. China may find itself pulled into diplomatic mediation, whether it wants to or not. Now, let's apply our solution lens. The standard realist prescription would be overwhelming force to compel surrender. But history suggests that decapitation strategies rarely produce stability. We've seen this in cartel wars in Mexico. We've seen it in previous regime changes in the Middle East. Power vacuums fill with violence. A constructivist approach asks different questions. What ideas motivate the various actors? What identities are being formed and reformed? How might new narratives of stability emerge? 3 non-military levers could matter. First, regional diplomacy. The Gulf states have leverage. They can press for de-escalation because American bases are on their soil. Saudi Arabia, in particular, has an interest in preventing Iranian fragmentation that would empower non-state actors on its borders. Second, the nuclear question. The stated goal is eliminating Iran's nuclear capability, but military action may actually accelerate proliferation motivation, a diplomatic framework for regional nuclear restraint, not just Iranian, but broader, could provide an off-ramp. Third, the post-Khamenei transition. Reports suggest the regime is fracturing, but not collapsing. There are actors within Iran's power structure who might negotiate a managed transition. The question is whether anyone is talking to them. The humanitarian dimension cannot be an afterthought. We're seeing displacement, civilian casualties, and the potential for massive refugee flows. The principles of international humanitarian law, distinction, proportionality, precaution must guide all operations.
Tech and tactics, the modern battlefield.
Let's shift to how this war is being fought. We're seeing the combat debut of technologies that will define the coming decade. The Small Wars Journal reports that the United States deployed LUCAS, a copy of the Iranian Shahed 136 drone, for the first time against Iranian targets. There's a grim irony here. The American military is using an Iranian drone design against Iran. This is technology transfer in reverse, a reminder that innovation in warfare often comes from adaptation. The Army has also confirmed the first combat use of the pre-SM missile, precision strike missile, as part of Epic Fury. This next-generation system represents a significant capability increase, but capabilities are not strategy. RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, has documented the cyber dimensions. They're calling it fog, proxies, and uncertainty. Cyber operations accompany kinetic strikes, targeting Iranian command and control, but also creating ambiguity. Who is responsible for what? The fog of war has a digital layer now. But here's what concerns me most, from a stability perspective. These technologies lower the threshold for conflict. A drone strike doesn't require the same commitment as a manned aircraft mission. A cyber attack can be launched from thousands of miles away. The costs, both financial and political, are lower. And when costs are lower, the temptation to use force increases. This is not an argument against technology. It's an argument for new frameworks. Just as nuclear weapons eventually generated arms control regimes, these new domains require norms of behavior. Who decides when a machine kills? Euractiv has raised exactly this question. We need international frameworks for autonomous systems, for cyber operations, for the use of AI in targeting. The constructivist insight is crucial here. These norms don't emerge automatically. They are built through diplomatic engagement, through shared understanding, through the construction of international regimes. And they require leadership not just from the United States, but from Europe, from the global south, from civil society.
Thematic Deep Dive, Europe's Defense Awakening.
Now let's turn to Europe, where this conflict is exposing a profound crisis. Iran possesses missiles capable of striking European territory. Euractiv has documented this capability, and it matters because it reframes the conflict. This is not a distant regional war. It is a conflict that can reach European capitals. Cyprus has already been targeted, but the response has been complicated by internal EU tensions. Euractiv reports that Greece has mobilized forces, raising Turkish eyebrows. The Mutual Defense Clause of the European Union, Article 42.7, is being seriously tested for the first time. How does solidarity work when member states have different threat perceptions and different relationships with the parties involved? But the deeper story is about European defense capabilities. The Future Combat Air System, FCAS, a €100 billion joint Franco-German-Spanish project to develop a sixth-generation fighter, is, in the words of the EU Defense Commissioner, a failure. Disputes over work share, technology transfer, and whether to build one aircraft or two have brought the program to the brink of collapse. France is now proposing a nuclear steering group with Germany and Britain, extending the French nuclear umbrella. Euractiv documents President Macron's proposal to involve Europeans in deterrence exercises, but there's skepticism in Berlin. Can European defense integration advance when national interests diverge so sharply? Spain has blocked the United States from using Spanish bases. This is not obstructionism, it is a different calculation about national interest and risk. Why does this matter from a stability perspective? Because the liberal international order that has provided relative peace in Europe since 1945 was constructed. It was built through institutions, through shared ideas, through the deliberate creation of interdependence. The European Union itself is evidence that constructivism works, that shared identities and interests can be created through political action. But that order requires maintenance. It requires investment. And right now, Europe is confronting the gap between its aspirations and its capabilities. A solution-oriented approach asks, what can be done? First, emergency coordination mechanisms. The EU needs rapid decision-making structures for security crises. The current consensus requirements are too slow. Second, burden-sharing frameworks. The French nuclear umbrella proposal could work, but it requires German trust and German contribution. That trust must be built. Third, industrial cooperation that actually functions. The FCAS failure should prompt a rethink of how European defense projects are structured: incentives, governance, technology transfer rules. The path to European defense autonomy is not about replacing NATO. It's about creating credible European capability that makes the alliance healthier and more sustainable.
Under the radar.
And now, time to go under the radar. This week, I want to draw your attention to a story you probably haven't seen in the headlines, but one that offers crucial lessons for understanding the current moment. The Small Wars Journal has published an analysis titled, "When Killing a Kingpin Becomes Policy Theater." It examines the Mexican strategy of targeting cartel leadership, specifically the killing of El Mencho, leader of the Jalisco New Generation cartel. Why does this matter for understanding Iran? Because it's the same strategic logic. Decapitation. Remove the leader, the organization collapses. Except it doesn't. The analysis shows that decapitation strategies against cartels have produced fragmentation, not elimination. New leaders emerge. Splinter groups form. Violence often increases as factions compete. The underlying structures, illicit networks, economic incentives, social grievances remain intact. There's a parallel here. The assumption that removing Khamenei produces Iranian collapse assumes the Islamic Republic is a top-down monolith. It is not. The IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is a complex institution with its own interests. The clerical establishment has factions. Popular grievances against the regime coexist with nationalist resistance to foreign attack. The Mexico case also illuminates the limits of force-only strategies. Designating cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, another policy under consideration, doesn't address the demand for drugs in the United States or the governance failures in Mexico that allow cartels to operate. The lesson is not that force is never appropriate. The lesson is that force without understanding underlying systems produces unintended consequences. Let me draw some threads together. We've examined the Iran conflict, a direct military confrontation that has ended decades of proxy warfare and created profound regional instability. We've seen how technology, drones, missiles, cyber operations is reshaping the battlefield and lowering the threshold for violence. We've explored Europe's defense crisis, a moment of reckoning where aspirations outrun capabilities. And we've noted the lessons from Mexico, how decapitation strategies often fail to produce the stability they promise. What connects these threads? The international system is not a mechanical structure with fixed rules. It is a social system, built on ideas, identities, and institutions. The realist paradigm would tell you that conflict with Iran was inevitable, that Europe's defense failure reflects immutable national interests, that violence is simply the natural state of international politics. But constructivism teaches us something different. These outcomes were produced by choices, by ideas about threat, about interest, about identity. And different choices could produce different outcomes. So, what is the path forward? For the Iran conflict, it begins with recognizing that military victory is not the same as political stability. A diplomatic framework for regional security, one that addresses legitimate Iranian security concerns, while constraining nuclear ambitions and proxy activities, is the only sustainable solution. That framework requires regional actors, European engagement, and ultimately, American diplomatic investment. For Europe, it requires building the institutions and capabilities that match the aspirations. The French nuclear proposal, the debate over FCAS, the questions about Article 42.7, these are not abstract discussions. They are about whether Europe can provide for its own security in a world where American attention may be elsewhere. For the global system, it requires new frameworks for new technologies, norms, rules, and institutions that can manage cyber conflict, autonomous weapons, and the diffusion of military technology. The architecture of stability is not given. It is built, and it can be rebuilt. That's the question we must all ask. Are we innovating for peace as quickly as we are innovating for war? Thank you for joining me on Emerging Threats Hub. If you found this analysis valuable, please subscribe and share. You can find us at emergingthreatshub.com, on Blue Sky and Twitter. Our newsletter provides deeper analysis and resources.